We're following breaking news this morning. Today, Hunter Biden has agreed to a federal plea deal.
This comes following a Justice Department probe into the president's son's business dealings. He's pleading guilty to 2 misdemeanor charges of failure to pay taxes. He also reached an agreement with the government on an illegal possession of a handgun charge, avoiding prosecution. Joining us now is CBS News senior investigative correspondent Herridge. Catherine, good to see you again. There has been a broad investigation into Hunter Biden, but it has come down to these 2 tax charges and the weapons offense. Is this it, or is this investigation still ongoing?
Well, Nikki, good to be with you. It all comes down to something called a memorandum of the plea agreement. This is the document where the 2 sides agree to the scope of what has been resolved. So all that matters is what's within the 4 corners of that document, and it has not been filed with the court yet, but it has to be filed before Hunter Biden has an appearance before the judge and she can sign off on this plea agreement. But what I would add is that we're already seeing some daylight between the 2 sides. In his statement, Hunter Biden's attorney said it's their understanding that the 5-year investigation into the president's son is now resolved. But in the statement from the U.S. attorney who's been leading this probe, he says the investigation is ongoing. So we'll see how those 2 sides are reconciled, if at all, in this plea agreement document.
And so the question I think a lot of people will have, Catherine, is how significant are these charges? These investigations have been going on for some 5 years now. And if you're to believe members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, there's a lot more there.
Right. So the challenge for the U.S. attorney in Delaware, and I would argue that he's been facing increased pressure to either indict the president's son, reach a plea agreement, or close the investigation, is I've not spoken to a former Justice Department or tax official who says it takes 5 years to do a simple tax case and gun case. So that's sort of point number 1. The second thing is that when you look at these charges, you start to understand that a lot of money was involved. Based on the records that were filed with the Delaware court earlier today, Hunter Biden agrees that he willfully decided not to pay tax on income of over $1.5 million in 2017 and also 2018. That's sort of a step short of tax evasion. It's a misdemeanor. And then on the gun possession by someone who's a drug user, if you just search over the last year, what you'll see is that people are routinely sentenced to federal jail time for lying on those forms when they obtain a weapon when it comes to their drug use. So the question is raised whether there might have been a different outcome if his last name wasn't Biden, it was something else.
Catherine, it appears there will be no jail time. Will this be enough for critics of the FBI and DOJ?
Well, based on the responses you've seen already from the Republicans who've been leading these investigations on Capitol Hill, especially in the House, it doesn't look like this will end their investigations. It may, in fact, even accelerate them. We've had a number of statements from individuals who want to seek the nomination for the GOP in 2024. And we also have heard from former President Donald Trump, who essentially is saying that this was a sweetheart deal, and it shows that the system is broken in his view, that there's sort of 2 tiers or selective justice. His case, he's just been indicted, of course, is much different than this tax and gun case, but that is the theme that's certainly being picked up by Republicans.
All right. We will continue to talk to you throughout the day. Catherine Herridge, thank you.
You're welcome.
Joining us now is Thomas Ostrander. He's a partner for Duane Morris LLP. So, sir, we're seeing a lot of criticism from some high-profile Republicans about this deal that was reached. You actually know the prosecutor in this case, David Weiss. He's a appointee of the former President Trump. What is your take on this plea deal reached? Because there's the law and then there's the politics involved in the investigation. So break those 2 backdrops down for us.
Well, I've known David Weiss for over 30 years, and I don't think that any political influence would move him in one direction or another. David is a very principled guy, hard worker, smart, fair, and I think David, in his position as U.S. Attorney, is going to make a determination of what a appropriate settlement or resolution of a case would be simply upon the facts. Whatever the facts are in the case, David's going to follow them And that's what's going to govern the resolution of the matter in his mind.
If this agreement had not been reached, what would Hunter Biden's legal alternatives have been?
Well, he could have forced the U.S. attorney in Wilmington to take the matter before a federal grand jury. That grand jury would likely return an indictment against him for these offenses and perhaps others. We don't know. And then he would be faced with the option of either trying the case before a jury in Wilmington or entering a plea of guilty to one or more of those offenses. So those are the options that are presented to any defendant in a criminal matter. But here, the matter was resolved as a result of the negotiations between the two parties. And I would point out, those are the only people who know what the real facts are in this case. The talking heads, the politicians who are making the point about a sweetheart deal or things to that effect, they're making their statements based upon ignorance. They have no idea what the actual facts are. So let's wait and see what the real facts are. Let's wait and see what's filed in the court. Let's wait and see with what occurs actually in court before we make any determinations of whether this is or is not a sweetheart deal. I really, really doubt that that's an appropriate way to characterize a deal from David Weiss, who, as I said, is a very, very principled prosecutor.
And you're already starting to see, as you heard perhaps our correspondent Catherine Herridge point out, there's some daylight between what Hunter Biden's attorneys are saying and what the office of the U.S. Attorney David Weiss is saying. Mr. Biden's attorneys seem to be indicating that, as far as they're concerned, or as far as they understand it, the investigation is over. But the U.S. Attorney Weiss seems to indicate that the investigation is still ongoing. Is that because the judge hasn't accepted this plea deal yet?
Well, I think it's more of a function of the following. Any defendant in a criminal matter, especially one of this complexity, is going to want a global resolution to the matter. That is, whatever the plea is the final deal. There's nothing more to be done. The investigation is completed. But U.S. attorneys don't want to promise that there is a conclusion to the case, because you don't know what more there is out there. So again, this has been a investigation that's been going on for 5 years. Maybe or maybe not, there's more to it than these simple charges. We simply don't know. But if there is this gap, and I don't know if there is in fact this gap, but if there is a gap between the government and the defense counsel, it may be simply the matter of there's more here to be looked into. Whether or not it ends up in any type of prosecution, who knows? We just simply don't know all the facts.
Thomas Ostrander, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
You're so very welcome. Thank you.